Well, absolute catastrophe is coming to California where I live, and I had 2 days notice of it, and that's a little surprising to me because I kind of keep my eye on the news for a living. It's going to be worse than an asteroid strike. It's going to be worse than wildfires. It's going to be worse than a major earthquake. It's going to be worse than COVID-19. You think I'm exaggerating? You don't live in the same city I do. In 2 days, after we record this on August 20th, the judge has ordered that California's law AB 5, which requires that essentially all freelancers must become full-time employees of the companies that they work for. Uber and Lyft are going to shut down operations throughout California. It's 220,000 more Californians who will be out of work as a result of this insane law that was designed to protect unions and push through the California legislature. 220,000 new people out of a job in these unbearably tough times. Worse than that, food delivery services, I imagine, like Uber Eats and Postmates and all the rest of it, they'll be shut down starting in 2 days. Restaurants that are hanging on by their fingernails due to takeout orders on the part of customers, they're going to shut down. Those jobs are going to be gone, and so on. And gentlemen, I'm Bill Whittle, by the way, here with Steve Green and Scott Ott. I'd be willing to bet, Steve, we'll start with you. I gave this a little bit of cursory thought, and I really honestly believe this. I can't think of a place on planet Earth that is more dependent on ride sharing than Los Angeles. It's a huge city. It's a metropolitan city. It's not like you're out in the country. Nobody's really depending on Uber or Lyft to get them to and from their farm. And other cities are considerably more compact. If Los Angeles, anywhere you're going, is a 45-minute drive from anywhere else, period. Yeah. This town lives and breathes on Uber. And furthermore, it has become such a part of life out here now that I know many millennials who simply don't drive because they don't know how to drive. They don't need to drive. They are so used to just touching that app and getting in the car and going where they're going. I'm telling you, I think it is going to be an absolute explosion when people realize in 2 days that we got to get going. Our flight leaves in, who am I kidding about a flight? But we got to get going. We got this appointment that's going to be going. And it's like, oh, sorry, no, black screen here. We are no longer able to serve California because the Democrats, they won't say Democrats, have decided that independent contractors are not allowed here. And Uber needs to spend $500 million, which is the number, about 230 or something million for Lyft, in order to make all of their employees who own their own cars into full-time employees of those companies, in order to be fair and save jobs.
Yeah, fair is telling me that I don't have the right to contract anymore. One of our God-given and inalienable rights? No. That's being held hostage. Bill, you reminded me of a story. I'd forgotten about this. This is 40 years ago now, almost. It was when the courts ordered the breakup of AT&T. So what was that, 1982, 1983? Yes, I remember my dad, very much Ayn Rand-style libertarian, just being livid about the whole thing. And I believe his exact words were, I hope somebody at DOJ calls up the phone company for some kind of problem and finds there's nobody there. And that's what's going to happen to people who have depended on ride sharing for years now. They're going to load up the app somewhere in Los Angeles, somewhere in San Jose, somewhere in San Francisco, and there's not going to be anybody there. And all those drivers with no work. Lorena Gonzalez is the bad guy here. She's a Democratic Assemblywoman from the San Diego area. The AFL-CIO wrote AB 5 for her. She affixed her name to it and pushed it through the California Assembly. To give you an idea of what kind of a piece of work she is, she's also very active on Twitter. And you're going to have to bleep me on this one, but it's me quoting Lorena Gonzalez, who had somebody, I believe, a fellow progressive Democrat, complaining that AB 5 was going to put them out of work. And she said, that it's a bad job.
She also was the person who said, F Elon Musk, when Elon Musk said that he's going to go back to work despite these COVID-19 restrictions because he showed data that these are the actual occupancy of hospital beds. Yeah, same charming woman.
Exactly. She is a wholly owned subsidiary of the AFL-CIO. She does their bidding. And what really ought to frighten you, look, there are millions and millions of contract workers all over the country. In 2 days, there will be fewer of them as AB 5 goes more into effect. Nancy Pelosi or somebody in the Democrat-controlled House copied and pasted the language of AB 5 and stuck it into an existing labor reform bill that's been sitting in the House going nowhere because the Republican-held Senate. If the Democrats take control of the Senate, and certainly if they take the Senate and the White House in November, by January, that thing is going to be law. I guarantee you, January 21, essentially contract work is going to be illegal throughout this nation. I'm going to be out of work. Scott's going to be out of work. I don't know how many millions, tens of millions of people will be thrown out of work by this thing because the Democrats want to do this. They want to take away your right, your natural existing right to negotiate your own terms of employment. And that is downright un-American, and it's downright evil. And we better vote as if our jobs depended on it in November, because they do, literally.
Well, speaking about voting on it in November, Scott, you would think that a law this unpopular would never have gotten passed in the first place. But of course, it got passed because it never really hit anybody except for people who are working in the entertainment business, which is a significant number of people out here. But when average citizens realize that they no longer can get to where they're supposed to be in 10 minutes, it's going to hit home. This kind of thing is going to hit young people, artists. It's basically going to hit the Democratic core constituency out here. And while I'm sure they're not going to put this was a result of a Democratic law on the actual sticker, it's going to be clear to somebody that this is what needs to be done. Now, as it turns out, there was a ruling that said that that AB 5 could be put up for the November ballot. But it wasn't to see if you could repeal AB 5. This was just to simply allow a carve-out so that Uber and Lyft would be able to continue to function. So first of all, Scott, just your opinion on the fact that, well, if you're powerful enough, you might be able to carve your way around this law. But more importantly, I don't see any way on earth, I mean this, I live here, I do not see how Los Angeles will function for 2 months without Uber and Lyft. I think there's going to be an emergency session of the legislature or whatever it takes. But why do you think that they're shooting themselves in the foot this way with so much of their, not only their core voting group, but their entire future? Young people hit hardest here.
It's a complicated recipe from the progressive left, but they see the great times in America for their party as when everybody worked for a major corporation. And most of those corporations employed people who were unionized, and union numbers were much higher than they are now as far as enrollment as union membership. And the companies, little by little, wound up with responsibility to take care of things that people used to take care of for themselves. All of a sudden, the company was responsible for your health care and your dental care and your vision care and your retirement. And in some cases, how you get to and from work, and more responsibility taken away from the individual and put into the corporation or the large organization. And it was easier to whip votes from big unions than it is having to go around door to door and ask individual people for their support. All you had to do was talk to a committee of the big union, and you could turn out tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people to the polling places in support of your candidates. And so all of that said, this legislator in the California Assembly probably legitimately thinks this is a terrible job, because in her mind, a good job is one where someone else assumes full responsibility for your well-being.
Yeah.
But that's not the American way. And it's this period of history will be looked back upon as an aberration when big corporations were the rule of the day. Because before that whole, Industrial Revolution thing hit, it was very common for people whose main business was, let's say, farming, to also have 1, 2, or 3 other side businesses that they were engaged in, some sort of small manufacturing operations, or providing a service, or, giving people rides in your wagon or whatever. They always had a side hustle, as they now call it, as if it were some sort of freak thing that's going on now. That was normal. Americans were always trying to find ways to add value to other people's lives in ways that would benefit them. In addition, if you are working for a big corporation, there is something that is almost, born to be wild liberation about getting into your own car and going around and running your own little business by picking people up and taking them where they want to go. There's some freedom in that. I have a friend who was, I don't know if he's still doing it, but he worked with me full-time as a commissioned salesperson in the retail store where I work, but he also drove for one of these ride-sharing services. And he said when he went down to visit his son, who lives like an hour south of him, he would actually Uber his way down, he said. And by that, he meant he would pick up people and take them places on his way to visit his son. And that little trip would cover the cost of, the gas and, buying his son lunch or whatever when he went to visit him. That was his choice. At work, we don't get to make as many choices. We got to play by the rules of the corporation. And that's okay if you work for a good corporation, but there is something primal in a man or woman that says, I want to be able to exercise my liberty to earn my money the way I choose to do so. And I don't care if it's $10 an hour or $50 an hour. It's the freedom to choose.
Yes, absolutely right. It's an old adage and a true adage that when you see something this incredible, something huge politically or economically that doesn't make any sense, follow the money and you will figure out why this is. So where's the money here? Obviously, the unions support the Democrats. The Democrats then put legal restrictions into the way of other people's businesses so that the unions can protect their own interests, and then those unions get their members to go out and vote for more Democrats, and so the cycle of death continues. But when you think about following the money, I personally think, I haven't heard anyone else discussing this, but I think that this is why they're trying to do this, not just to Democrats, but to freelancers all across the country. Why AB 5 is essential for the Democratic Party to survive as we understand it. It's not just that it is an example of why unions are no longer needed and why they have been obsolete for 25 or 30 years. Ever since the information age, there's no union, there's no graphic designers union, there's no app makers union. It's way past necessary. But if you follow the money, here's why I think these Democrats are trying so hard to get rid of independent contractors. They're trying to get rid of independent contractors because independent contractors, there's more and more of them every single day. As Scott pointed out, in the agrarian age, now in the information age, you can have 2, 3, 4, 5 different sources of income. We live in a gig-based economy. So far, so good, but they can't really tax that money. And much, much, much more importantly, this is the thing I'm telling you. If you are an independent contractor, you have to write a check to the government 4 times a year and part with money that is already in the bank in order to pay the taxes on your money. The reason that independent contractors have to be destroyed, if you want to follow the money, is because the reason that this government costs $4 trillion a year is because the people who are paying for it never touched that money. Ever. It was never in your hands. If you work for a large corporation and you've signed a contract and or whatever, you're hired and you're hired at $600 a week. Okay. And you get your paycheck and it's $430. And well, that's federal withholding, comes with the job. And so that money, that difference between $600 and $430, that money is going to the state every single paycheck. And then on April 15th, you celebrate when they give you back $600 or $700 of that money, and you think, wow, what am I going to do with this $700? The reason this government costs what it does, the reason that we have trillions of dollars of entitlements is because it's paid for, because it's never our money, because if you work for a large company, you never touch it. You never have to part with it. You don't get it, but you never have to give it back. If the entire country were to become more and more independent contractors, where every single person in America, just think about this for a second. If every single person in America was a freelancer and every single person in America had to write a check out of their bank account for the amount of money that is withheld from them, then the game is over. Yeah. The game is over. I want to call this Whittle's Law because we're seeing such strange things this year. But here's Whittle's Law for those of you that are keeping score. Whittle's Law says this: anytime you see anybody doing something the optics of which are so unbelievably bad, you can rest assured that the only reason they're doing it is because the other option's optics are even worse. That's the only explanation for this kind of thing. If Joe Biden doesn't debate Donald Trump, the optics are going to be terrible, and the only reason he wouldn't debate Donald Trump would be if the alternative would be worse. So I think that the progressives are going to be in for a very, very, very big surprise on this one. I cannot think of a way
Fingers crossed.
to drive people, young people, into the Republican camp more than to do something like this. And just to close, I know I run on with these things, but Steve said, well, it's my God-given right to make a contract. This means nothing to people who've never had a civics class in their lives. But this will mean something to them if we have a politician or anybody with the sense to say, the Democrats can't stand the fact that you can talk to a guy with a car and say, you got a car and I've got some money. Why don't you pick me up and take me over there and I'll give you some money in exchange for the ride? Well, where does the government take their cut out of this? Well, why would they take their cut out of this? What do they provide? They don't provide anything. Then it becomes clear. It's a catastrophic mistake on their part, and it's going to be interesting to watch. I expect that by next week we will be doing another show on the emergency session of Congress that overturned AB 5. But if not, it's going to be a long couple months here in Los Angeles. For Steve Green, Scott Ott, and the rest of the crew here, I'm Bill Whittle, and this show is made possible by the paying members at BillWhittle.com, to whom we are very, very grateful. We'd love to have you be one of them. We'll see you next week here on Right Angle.